and say that we do allow for that school to not ask. So that's where the fuel to the fire comes in to say, well, if you do it for one, that means you don't really hold liability issues, because that means you could do it with others. But again, being its own entity, its own governing board, that's above definitely my pay grade. We can move this ball forward, but it definitely will be at that level with the school board. But I will say that that decision was made for Nixon.
I think maybe the property owner that came over to have this request, you know, he didn't want any signs on his street. He didn't want no parking signs on his street. But maybe that property owner needs to approach the UISD board and ask them to do what Nixon did.
We have a president. They already opened one school, so if they open
But
one,
that's
they should open
LISD.
all of them.
So that's LISD.
It doesn't matter.
It does, you got two.
Yeah, no, I
two
understand there's two different boards. But if one school district says that they don't have any liability, the other one shouldn't have any liability
That's
either.
true.
Well,
So
yeah,
that's-
for LASD, I find it difficult to believe that they only allow that for Nixon. I mean, if you do for one, you have to do for all. I mean,
And to your point, sir,
And we know that's the only one so
and,
far.
and to your point, you're right.
Yes.
Let's just say a kid, for whatever reason, decides on his own to go park somewhere else, outside of Nixon, for whatever reason, he's gonna leave early or whatever. By Nixon or LISD already saying it's okay, then the liability falls back to that student. You know what I
For
mean?
parking
For
outside.
parking outside when he has the opportunity to park inside. So that kind of, that's good for Nixon.
Yeah, it helps.
You know, it helps the school board. Now, my question is, when United is saying for liability for what? Like what is it that they're saying?
That if there's an accident, that they can be a party to a suit, that they would be,
But the school district itself, if I walk into the school district and there's a wet floor and I fall, they have insurance. I mean, I'm assuming as soon as you walk into their property, you're automatically covered, or no?
I don't know about that.
If I can add to that, you're absolutely right. As a public entity and I work at TAMU, we're covered under the doctrine of sovereign immunity, which gives us immunity in certain situations. And the only liability I would see is if a student goes and hits a building. Let's say that they just ram into a campus and they don't have insurance, then I understand the district would turn around and say, okay, well, who's gonna pay for this? Because technically you would go after the insurance. But if there's a vehicle accident in the actual property, the person driving that vehicle is the one responsible, not the school district. The school district would be responsible if they didn't have the proper signage, then that would be another issue. I mean, that's just my opinion, but that's the only liability I see is if they run into a building or property of UISD, how, usually the person would go after the insurance, and if that person does not have insurance, then how would they recoup that money? Am I-
yeah, we're just for clarification purposes, we agree with what the board is saying. So we
You did
tend to
your part.
agree, well, we tend to agree that there probably is no liability. But again, we can't go into that realm of their governance, you know, where they, you know, make their own rules kind of deal. But we're not suggesting that we don't want them to use their parking facilities. That's why they were built. And in all honesty, taking my traffic director hat off and putting my UISD taxpayer on, I wish they would. We all.
Are we, or is the city going by and giving tickets to whoever's parking out there in the residence?
Well, that was my question. I was gonna ask that too. Are we
I hope
implementing?
not. Poor kid.
We had police with us that day, school police and our own Laredo Police Department here and they said that they don't have the resources to be able to do that sort of assignment. We don't have the
And
resources to do
there
it.
currently isn't any, no parking signs there, so technically, legally, they can park there.
Right.
I guess it's gonna have to take somebody from that neighborhood to go to the UISD school board and request that just like somebody did to the LISD school board
Right.
and requested. I mean, I don't know if this committee were to do that, or the council member for that area to do that, or Joe Public go and file that. In this case, what we've done is, we did our due diligence, we have the letter to back it up. And if that neighborhood, if anybody from that neighborhood comes and say, hey, do something here, well, we've got this letter, you're gonna have to go to UISD. I mean, I know we're passing the buck around, but
We have
it is
one,
another entity.
right, yes, and we have one option, really a tool currently right now, and it really is enforcement. And so enforcement would mean, first of all, trying to find the resources to be able to enforce, one, but then going out there and finding who is unlicensed, uninsured as well. Because the parking, for the most part, as you mentioned, is legal for the most part. So unless you catch them moving and pull them over.
But you're making the assumption that everyone that's not parking within the campus has some issue for not meeting the qualification. Is that correct?
No, what I'm saying is that you cannot make that assumption. In other words, if you see a line of cars parked with no drivers in them and it not moving, there would be no probable cause to even go up to the driver sitting there unless it's moving. If it's moving, then you would pull it over under the suspicion that you would have to have probable cause to pull them over even for a moving violation. And so it would have to be legally parked, one, to be able to do something. If they're parked legally, you don't know that person that brought that car had insurance or not. And I don't know if you'd have an officer wait there by the vehicle, you know what I'm saying, and kind of asking those sort of questions. So I guess from our part, if it's legally parked, that kind of satisfies one issue. Now that it clogs up a lot of our streets, we entirely agree. We saw pictures where the school parking lot was practically empty for that school. And they were okay with that. Because they said the ones that are there are the ones who have insurance and have licenses. And everyone else figure it out. They didn't care how they got there, as long as they didn't step foot in there with the vehicle without the proper documentation. They didn't mind that it was out there, they didn't mind because I was not in their jurisdiction, but it falls on our jurisdiction. So, I want to provide that update.
Thank you. Any status update on speed modifications at Belmont Plaza?
So, I'll try to be as quick as I can on this. There was a request. There was an individual that went before city council, a homeowner that lives in the Belmont area by Laredo Morning Times, about, north of the mall, saying that the traffic speeds were too high, that there was a lot of speeders, and begged the council members to lower the residential speed limit for the entire city to 20 miles an hour, just outright. So when that happened, and that was just an open session, and so when asked about that, we kind of came back and provided that response. Our city attorney came back out and said, you can't make these blanket changes. That's the state legislature that sets those regulations, those rules, so that's Austin. And if you were to lower them in any respect anywhere else, then we would have to have justification on an individual basis. So you would have to individually study these, even if you were to consider this. So the council directed staff to go out there and go from a 30-mile-an-hour speed zone to a 25-mile-an-hour speed zone with those signs put up in two different entrances for the Belmont area, to see if that would satisfy or lower the speeds of people coming in and out of the Belmont area. Now mind you, as this happened, we had just reported, and the councilman himself said, you understand that we just installed 13 speed humps in the Belmont area.
At what cost?
Well, and yes, and that was from the district priority fund, so the council member paid for it. But the idea of the comment was, look, haven't done that much in one area to begin with, but you're asking for additional, regulation to slow down the speeds. So we complied, we went out there and we set up, and we actually caught speeds at current conditions with 30. And we caught speeds go at 25. And the difference is almost, it's insignificant. There was no change. We know and we understand that without enforcement, the sign could say 1 mile an hour, it could say 100 mile an hour. And unless you know that there may or may not be enforcement, it really is tough. I don't handle the police department, we partner with them, we're partners in this, and we've asked them to help in this neighborhood. But we can tell you that they're coming out of Belmont on Esperanza is as fast as they go, because coming in, they know they're about to hit 13 speed humps. And what I mean by going faster, we're talking about 1 mile an hour or 2 at most. So, again, to be able to close this loop, what we're gonna come back to the council and suggest, bringing it to you, is to say that changing this arbitrarily, one, is not one thing that we wanna do. Secondly, they wanted this to be the test case, to show that if we were to change individually the signs, that speeds would lower. And we have data to prove, and it's in your packet, that the speeds did not change. By any
Speed humps
significant.
did.
Speed
That
humps
helps.
do, they do help, but they come at a cost, right? So speed humps, and not just the construction cost, you know, it does also slow down emergency vehicles. It does cause some possible risk when you have a person in an ambulance perhaps with a spinal injury, and you're trying to get that person to the hospital, and you gotta slow down for 13 speed humps. So when we bring speed humps, to let you know as well, before the city council, fire department for the most part always denies them unless it's by a school or by a rec center. But for the most part, they do not agree with speed humps. You know, as a department, that's not the first approach we take as well. But we wanted, again, to bring that out and back to you, because it's gonna happen as I'm gonna go back to city council, and Councilmember Alco, that's actually his district, District 7, the mall. He's the one who requested this to happen. And so we're gonna bring that, put it back on the agenda, be able to report this back to them and close it up. I wanted to show you this because in case you hear about some odd test case of some speed modification, it's essentially what it was.
We can make a motion to recommend to council that the speed limit stay the same, but we've done our part in the transportation area, but adding the speed humps.
Yes, sir. That's great, thank you.
So, anybody
Well,
wanna
before-
entertain a motion for
Before
that?
you do that, so, but I was always under the impression that if you have a street that's access to the whole city, that anyone could go in. I mean, this area is excluded to only those who actually live in that neighborhood,
That's
correct?
why it's a test case.
You know, so to put in 13 speed bumps in a neighborhood? Wow.
The, just to let,
On streets.
just to let you know,
I'm looking at it.
so that you know, there's a speed hump policy that we have, it's on our website, you can see it, we got a link on there. There is this provision, a special provision at the very end of it, that trumps the actual analysis requirement for a speed hump. So if you were to want a speed hump in your neighborhood, there's a process you follow. And so we actually go and calculate speed and whatnot to see if it qualifies or not. There's a catch-all at the bottom of our speed hump policy that says the council can waive all of that and pretty much direct those placements of those speed humps per their
Whatever
direction.
they see fit.
So they see that.
And so I don't know when the last speed hump came about from the department itself. But the ones that you see come up, come from that policy and that ability for a special provision.
Sure, you have the residents that are calling the council members saying, we need a speed hump right here.
Yes, sir.
So please,
Yeah.
I'm just go ahead and put it on,
And put it on.
without any kind of,
And that's the council member responding to their constituent.
What street were you monitoring?
So we did
Esperanza?
Esperanza, and then the side street, Encino.
Encino's the one that leads you, like if you're going to the.
Man
to-
Road.
Right, the
Right.
man road.
So Esperanza, if I'm seeing this right, Esperanza itself has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 speed bumps. Is that right? So to me, if I'm leaving the mall
Yes, sir.
and I'm getting Esperanza, I'm gonna get to that other street and then turn to go to Man Road, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So the people that are traveling that street have 1, 2, 3 speed bumps to get to before they get to that, and they're still going 30 miles an hour?
No, that slows them down.
It slowed them down.
Yes, sir. They're traveling, what, 20,
Yeah, I guess the counters were placed before, or at the entrance to the subdivision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before they got to the speed humps.
Yeah.
And so we were monitoring speeds as they come in and leave. And as Mr. Reed stated, they're gaining speed as they departing from the subdivision after they've
Yeah.
encountered the speed humps.
Yeah, so then you put the speed humps and now that has reduced the speed limit. Sure.
That's good. I mean,
and did its purpose, yeah, you know.
Well, that's what speed humps do.
how far are those speed bumps from each other?
About 200 feet.
You can get the speed up, yeah, right? I mean,
Well, you don't, because then you're gonna hit the brake. You're gonna hit the brake.
yeah,
Right.
that's good. I mean,
I would entertain a motion to recommend to council that speed humps are sufficient and that the speed limit stay the same. Anybody wanna make that motion?
I guess I'll make that
You wanna
motion.
make that motion, is that
I make
okay?
the motion, yeah, I'll
Or
make
we
the
can no
motion
bill
that,
it?
that we, motion to inform council that,
That our recommendation is just that the
speed humps.
speed humps are sufficient
Enough.
and speed reductions would be redundant if they were put in there. We've accomplished what we needed to accomplish or for the council just by adding the speed humps.
What he said.
We got that on
Second?
record, we got that.
You will second that? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against, same sign. Motion carries. That way you can just go to council and say, hey, look, this comes from the committee. This is our recommendation from the committee.
And just to let you know as well, the council's been very good about, asking, almost requiring, recommendation from this committee on transportation issues. So when I bring any item, there are always, a portion of that where I do have a recommendation of what the committee is saying, because they do wanna hear, from this committee, and they're interested to know what your opinion is. So that's, every time you give it, it helps us out entirely, because I always put down there, Transportation Safety Advisory Committee recommends or does not recommend.
Okay, presentation by traffic department on a traffic signal at Pinnacle Road and Farm Road 1472.
I'll go ahead and send up here presentation. This is in regards to the request that we received for a traffic signal, and I want to thank again Dan McGee, be working closely with us on a request at this intersection of Pinnacle, which is a future connection to World Trade Center, FM 14 to the south section of the road. I'm gonna show you a little map here. Can you go to the next one, please? Basically, we received this request, and I'll give you a chronology of events since we started, we got this request, and we've been meeting with Tex, and we meet with them, with both parties to discuss this request. Of course, we don't just look at at the volumes of the traffic that's being generated, which they did provide a report, but we also look at everything else, how it's gonna affect the traffic on Mines Road, it's gonna generate other problems, being that we have a lot of curves approaching that area, so we're looking at all those things. So can you go ahead, next one, Bob, please? This is just chronology, like I mentioned, we originally received that report, basically indicating to us that based on their projected traffic volumes for the Loves, this is only the Loves, location, this is, that it was, that they recommend installing the traffic light, that it generates the volumes or enough to warrant this traffic light. Which we're to analyze and see what any concerns that we or Texas has, will be working with us. So then we had a first meeting in December, to discuss that report. And then, there was some questions about the way they provided some of the traffic numbers. Texas suggested that they provided some additional information on traffic count data, so they incorporated that onto the report. And then we got in December 29, we got the updated engineering report incorporating Texas numbers in terms of truck. I think it was trucks, right, Danny McGee, Danny, the trucks, right? That was the issue, the way they were counting trucks, something like that. So, and anyway, so, then we had a second meeting in February, this early in the year. And then, again, in meeting with Texas, looking at the whole area, we said we better request some type of, making sure that the site distance, because of the curves coming out of the location, post location, was not gonna be an issue. They came back February 28th, and they informed that, you know, they did meet all the requirements for a 70 miles per hour highway. It is, that's also one of the main concerns for us, it's a 70 miles per hour posted in that area. It doesn't become 55, I believe, as you get close to the that subdivision there, for this Green Ranch. So that was another concern that we have. So we're looking at everything here. And so the most recent request from them was, okay, if we would consider installation of a traffic light, show us how you're gonna handle that. If you just think about Mines Road, the traffic that signals generate on Mines Road right now, with 3 approaches. We got the one at Inter-America, we got the other one at Trade Center. You see the traffic, and it's only a 3 approach, it's a T intersection. Imagine this one having, it's gonna be a full-blown intersection, you know, all the approaches, left turns. So we wanted, that's the last thing we asked for. We're waiting for that, just wanna let you know that we're still analyzing, working closely with them. I've not received this last here. We wanna make sure that if they do a signal, show us, you know, how we're gonna handle, when I mean signal phase, how many approaches it's gonna have the signal, and how you're gonna address the level of service. And mainly also the delays, and also the traffic queues, like, can you go back to the first picture, Robert, this one right here. If you see here, you got this curve going around here. And let's say you put a signal here. You're gonna be expecting to get some traffic queues to form here. So there's people traveling at a fast rate of speed, then we wanna make sure they show us, you know, are you gonna be able to handle the traffic with the operation of the signal without creating any other danger, any safety situation for us? That's one of the main things, and again, the speed limit, the same thing from the other direction. We had talks about possibly maybe signalizing this location. I think we did talk to them, but they are aware that they have that option, right, Mr. Eads?
Yes, sir.
Because we're looking at why do we signalize both, we allow the left turns on this one and the other ones on this one. Basically restricting some of the movements here, if we can. So we're open for all those types of recommendations from their engineering group. So this is what we're doing. Let me show you some pictures. Can you go now to the picture, Robert? This is, this is going northbound. This sign's actually were placed, I think, by them because they're starting to do some of the work on the left turn lane to get into the development. Go ahead.
Northbound or towards Columbia?
This is northbound, as soon as you pass that Green subdivision,
Uh-huh.
you see it, I think this is the, what's it called?
It is towards Columbia.
It's
Towards Columbia.
Yeah, it's coming towards Columbia.
So it's going west?
Okay. Northwest, I'm gonna say, we always say north, it's really northwest. So you see here, there's a curve, and this is El Pico Road, I think this is right here, but if you go here, further down, you see the proposed location of the signal. Okay, so we wanna make sure, that's one of the concerns. Can you go ahead and continue? So you approach this area, this is the area in question. Next to it, we have the US cold storage. Let me tell you a bit about that. Originally, when we first had our first meeting, I believe, we were sitting here, we were discussing, they came in, a representative of the US Coast came in saying, we're against putting a signal there because by doing so, you stop the cars coming southbound here, you're gonna generate traffic queues, you're gonna block our access. to our, that was your, and so there was some delays in that process. But right now, the latest is that no, they're in agreement, they worked out some type of an agreement to do a road to here, and they're gonna share the driveway to come out there. So basically, they have to go back, that's why they have to go back and adjust the numbers, the projections. So that means you have a lot more traffic now being projected getting out of there. So that's a good thing, because we have a shared driveway instead of having two driveways, but this is basically the picture, go ahead, but this is the intersection in question, this is where they're asking for the traffic light. Next one, please. That's just another picture, you know, seeing, I think that truck made a U-turn, coming around, going back south. This is looking west, towards the love's gonna be right here, there's nothing happening other than the construction of the road right now. On the right side, you'll have US Cold Storage, so this is the approach, they'll have to cross, they're doing it now. And this is the eastbound approach looking the other direction. Go ahead. And this just showing a picture of the cold storage.
Isn't that where the cold storage been constructed? If you take that road, I think it's what, west?
This next one?
Land stores over
Yes, in the
there.
back, yes. But that's the next, that's the other one. That's the other intersection, which is this one.
Oh,
The
it's not
signal's
this
over
one.
here, they want it over here,
Uh-huh.
and this is the other intersection that
Which they're gonna ask
Vidal
for
Cantu.
anyway.
That's
Which
Vidal
is,
Cantu.
which is the one going into the cold storage
Right.
and land store.
Right. So this is what.
That's gonna generate a lot of.
So this is what's
traffic.
gonna, but this place gonna have access through here, and now they're also gonna have access through the back and towards this new proposed driveway they're asking for a signal. Next, please. Basically, this is just a closer picture here, here's Pinnacle, this is Vidal Trevino, that's the access.
Vidal Cantu, no?
Vidal Cantu, I'm sorry, that's the access to the coastal drive.
Old school, old school.
Right. Now, and this is another picture. Yeah. This is the, I saw those trucks trying to cross here, this is coming
Land
from.
stores, land stores.
Yeah. So again, this street on this side, I'm gonna say on the right side, it's a loop and it comes out over here. Well, the other side comes to the proposed signal. So it's still looking north, go ahead. Now, this is now looking south, as you travel south, before you approach the Vidal Cantu, did I say correct this time?
This time you did.
I could say, what did it say first? Vidal Trevino, my friend. Vidal Trevino. Anyway, we used to remember Vidal Trevino.
Yeah.
That's why I said, okay. Now, this is the first signal, so that, again, this is also an issue we're looking at, there's a curve approaching that road, Vidal Cantu, so see that side there is Pinnacle entrance, this is the West Coast Story, so we're looking at all that right now, go ahead, continue. And this is basically now where the new approach to get into the Love's facility is gonna be right here, there's just moving dirt right now, and the road's being constructed right now. The next one, I think, again, this is all the,
I'm
this
sorry,
all the
Mr.
work.
Moody, maybe you wanna point out that they developed the right turn lane, a decel lane for the driveway also.
That's part of that, their development, yes.
That's part of the construction.
And oh yes, thank you, Robert. This is, those, and they're also doing, right now, they're also gonna be doing improvements to this lane. That's why you saw the first picture, they show a curve, they're showing some signs. They're working on the left turn, that was required by Texas as part of the requirement to increase the left turn lane to get into that. We talked about possibly needing two, maybe depending on the numbers, that's what they need to show us how they're gonna handle the traffic, that's what we're waiting for. But yes, they did include that one on there.
How many acres is the Love facility?
Well, they mentioned
Just roughly.
I don't know, I know they said it was 10 truck bays and 12 cars, I made a note here somewhere. And I don't know the acres, do we all have that information? I know it's, I know the
Are they
50,000.
gonna have parking like for trailers and it'll be like a regular truck stop?
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. We can bring up the Google aerial map and we could even measure it if you'd like.
It's gonna be,
No, I was just wondering because, you know,
let me see if it says.
the in and outs is gonna be.
This one's gonna have two entrances, this one here, aligned with the other side of the road, at the other intersection, and another one further down. But this is the one that you're gonna be sharing with the US Cold Storage, and this is where they want a traffic light, get out of here. It is a 12 vehicle fuel station for cars, and 10 for 18-wheelers, and a 11,500 square foot retail store. It doesn't say the acres, so. It's part of the Pinnacle development.
Like 2038.
Looking for that, I don't see that, but go ahead. I don't know if I have any more information. I think that's all I have. I just wanted to let you know that this is what we're working on, and Danny, us all here, will be working closely with them because we understand the need for, to make economic development, but we also need to make sure that we find ways. Just because the signal is being warranted to us, doesn't mean that you have to install a light. We're looking for other options, alternatives. Like I said, we even talked about maybe putting 2 traffic lights, having some of the left turns made at the other location, some over here. Because if you can remove some movements here, if you can eliminate some of the movements here, that basically means that the red is shorter for some of the approaches. But we're working with them to see what would be the best thing to do. We haven't approved the signal, we're still pending the last part of the evaluation. Show us how you're gonna handle that. If you're gonna put a signal, how can you handle it with all those projected volumes, with all those approaches? Again, one thing that we know for sure, you cannot operate this movement and this movement together. You just can't because of this this little island in the middle. Basically what you have to do one approach, and then this side, and then this side, and then the left turn, and the other side. You can't run them together, so that really takes a lot of time to service all the movements, which means there's more delay on the approaches, which means that there's potential to have queues coming back here and something happening. And that's the report we're waiting for, and we have not received. I know they asked, and I said, well, just have the engineer call us and we'll work with them. But just want to make sure that you all know what we're working on, and you have any question, anything that you want to mention to us, that's what we're here for.
I do. You know very well that if they're asking a curb cut here or a traffic light there, you know they're gonna ask for one up there too. And are we prepared to, or is TxDOT prepared to do something? And you already see the delays going on at the Mines Road and all of the problems.
Actually, part of our solution is, I'm telling them they're probably gonna need 2 signals.
Right.
I don't think one signal can handle all the traffic. So we're probably gonna have to ask for 2 signals.
Oh, up here? And what do you mean by 2 signals?
One traffic signal right there by the Trade Center Loop, south and north.
This is what they're requesting.
So one here and one there.
What
What does that do with congestion? Is that gonna create congestions just like?
There's different ways of running it, and that's what we're asking
For them to give us,
is, you can either have one controller controlling each one, and then you tie them together physically with wires just so they're coordinated, or you run it with one controller, like in a big diamond mode. They need to show us what's the best way to run it.
and that way you restrict some of the
Maybe-
movements, yeah. You basically, you
But does it show us
somehow,
how they're gonna run it?
Who's there?
The
the
consultant.
consultant, they have to show, that's what we're waiting to see. Show us if you can do one signal, and they know that they have the option already know the signal here. And they're considering that, so we just show us how you operate the lights.
And I know Pinnacle is gonna have well, I know that the cold storage is talking to Love's and they're gonna have some sort of inner street
Yes.
so that their trailers can go over to Love's.
Something else that we were informed about the future of short road right streets.
Yeah.
You wanna add to
Well,
that, please?
yeah, no, if I can, just bring up a couple items. So one thing that has little to do with the assessment and the ultimate, well, has some bearing on this. But this signal would be funded by these individuals, one. And so at this point, with this process, it is with them funding, if the signal is deemed appropriate and authorized, they would be funding that. I went so far as to have the conversation and saying, hey, you might actually have to be looking at 2. And they're willing to have that conversation. But one thing to know as well is that once that window passes as well, and we say, no at this point, and it becomes warranted or needed, even more so down the road, then that investment will come directly from the city without any question, without any help. So again, that has nothing to do with the warranting of the signal itself, but that's one component of the calculus that's being made right now to say, at this point, they're saying, we believe we need it, we're willing to pay for it, but we're just saying, show us how you're gonna do it safely, And if you can't, we're gonna give you some options on how you may be able, to do it. And by placing 2 signals as well, that actually makes the flow, faster and better, where counterintuitively, one might think it works opposite, where you would have greater backup by having 2 signals. Actually, it would operate a little bit better, where you would have the flow, much better. But essentially what ends up happening is that, as the chairman said, you have those issues down south or east, however we'd like to call it. But, so instead of having the first signal down here, right? That's gonna be your first signal coming either, this way, or it's gonna be your last. At this point right now, like Mr. Murillo said and Mr. McGee had mentioned, we're not entirely convinced that has to happen. There's obviously great interest on their part to get this done. There's huge volumes that's going in and out, and they're gonna create huge volumes. So something will have to happen. I don't think a do nothing option is on the table at this point.
Can you change the location of that signal? If you are worried about the turn,
Great,
this turn,
right?
can you put it over here?
The development's already built out.
Right.
The village is gonna be over here.
Yeah.
No, I understand that, they want it there for their advantage.
Right.
But the problem is that we see sometimes a lot of signal lights
Right.
that are placed there because we think it's going to solve a problem, and a few years later, it doesn't solve a problem, it creates another problem. So, what I'm asking is basically that I understand that, they want that signal there, but for us, once the study's completed, it would probably show that the signal could probably be either before it'll probably give them the same time for those trucks to turn in, because they're gonna have to stop. I'm asking,
With all due respect, they're paying for the study, they're paying for the signal, they're not gonna suggest, put the signal over here.
Somewhere, yeah.
They're gonna, they want it there, and that's what
they want.
I have a question, Mr. Eads. I'm sorry, the actual maintenance of the signal, would that fall on them because or would that be a city of Laredo? That would be a city of
So
Laredo.
we turn it over to the city.
It would,
Just to Mr. Chair, we did discuss the process, because we're having a situation over here coming out of the Green Ranch subdivision, and I believe there was some issues, right?
I was about to ask that, because you have 600 lots or homes in something with one entrance.
What was the
And
issue with that, Mr. Peña? Oh, I'm sorry. What was the issue with that? Because we've been looking at that also, because we are, I don't know if it's still warranted or some issue, but we're saying, what if you do this and incorporate it? We talked about that, but of course, Mr. McGee says they're paying
Yeah.
because they want it over there.
But what's the time frame on the HR road? Cause the Green Ranch entrance is gonna be the
That's
HR
over
road.
here.
No, that
4
wasn't,
years.
yeah, that one wasn't,
What's the time frame on that?
Well, actually, it's creeping up real fast, relatively speaking, right? So I would say, dirt is probably gonna move probably within, I would say, Dan, I mean, if you were to guess, maybe 2 years?
I don't have a guess on